I would say I don't know exactly when I met Manson, what year or how far back, because it's so early in elementary school at Heritage Christian School that he's just as far back as my memories go of school, he's there. So alphabetically, we were always next to each other. So I'm WAD and he's WAR. Yeah, so 30 people, we got to sit in the W's in the back row of almost every classroom. And so we got to hang out all day, every day, and do all kinds of crazy stuff from elementary school up until 10th grade. Yeah. We were both shy kids. We were more introverted. We were closer to our moms than our dads. Our moms were both from West Virginia, and our dads were both in the military. My dad was in the Army, and I think his dad was too. I don't remember. Army, Marines, one of those. Me and Brian used to wear our dad's Army jackets and run around like we were playing Apocalypse Now in the forest all the time.
Manson's dad, then, what was he like? What was Hugh like?
He was hilarious. I think a lot of people liked Brian's dad. To me, I'm trying to think who he reminded me of, but he's kind of charming, but and he also has an edge to him. So you don't know exactly if he's putting you on or not. So he's kind of playful in that way. But I thought he was the coolest guy ever because, my parents were Christians and they don't smoke or any of that stuff. I get into Brian's car and his dad would be smoking and we'd jam the radio as loud as we could get it and peel out of the Christian school parking lot and go right around and whatnot. So his dad was always very cool.
How did he, if his parents were not these Christian conservatives, how did he end up going to that school? Was that school really prestigious, or what was the deal with that?
Our parents both had the idea that they wanted to send their kids to a school that had smaller class sizes, so they'd have more time with the teachers, and supposedly the quality of education was a lot higher there. At least that's what they said.
So his parents sent him there for practical reasons, and so I just want to kind of hone in on this. His parents, though, were not religious then.
No, not that I know of. They were Presbyterians, I think, at one point, but I've never seen them go to church or talk about it really. So.
Did you meet his mother?
Oh yeah, I used to hang out at his house after school just about at least 3 or 4 times a week because my mom didn't get off till like 5 o'clock, so I'd hang out over there until she picked me up.
What was his mother like?
His mom was she was a strong woman, but she was like she could hold her own, but she was more nurturing. Like, she'd be the one that would make you all sandwiches or cookies or, the typical mother types things of that time period, I should say.
Right.
Which would have been the late 70s, early 80s. His mom was just as cool in the car. She liked the Bee Gees and ELO and Billy Squier, all kinds of stuff. Yeah. This is 8-track era.
Yeah, no, but ELO, that's great. 1 second here.
Oh, yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting paradox in my mind that Manson did not come from a religious family, but he ended up in this really religious school. So what was your attitude? Let me pull it back. So how religious was the school? When you read Long Hard Road Out of Hell, you get an impression that like you kids were just constantly oppressed by this religious propaganda. And so I'm from Texas, Baptist, all of that. So, I'm not denying that it exists, but I'm curious, is it pretty accurate to what is written in the book pretty accurate about how those teachers were really pretty obnoxious with all the religious stuff?
I wouldn't say at the time, I didn't find them not obnoxious, and it wasn't like we were oppressed, but they were definitely, there was a certain range of that you had to stay within. It felt like it was pretty much casual, like any other school, except there would always be these Bible added things because it was supposedly Bible-based teaching. So, you memorize Bible verses. But then every Friday we had what was called chapel. And that's when they brought in all these speakers. And that's where all the weird stuff started happening, where they brought in backward masking and, all kinds of stuff from the satanic panic era. And they would just bring them in, like small churches around. A minister would come in and talk, and I couldn't even tell you what half of them said because we never paid attention to it. So it's like, we were pretty much the two non-believers of the class. The rest of our classmates were, future missionaries and that type of stuff. But
right.
We weren't having that. So
what was Manson? What was Brian's attitude back then? Was he resentful of it?
No, he wasn't resentful. I mean, we were going to school and we had a good time and all that. It wasn't like we felt like, oh, this sucks and we're in a bad mood all the time. But when you're under, when you have to sign a student conduct code. Where it says, you won't use cuss words, you won't gamble, you won't have sex, you won't do, all this stuff. Right. You have to sign that every year. So, like if you hung out in the hallway too long with some of the girls or whatever, one of the teachers would come by and be like, move along, move along. You know what I mean? It's like, what's going to happen here in the hallway?
It seems so quaint now, like you say. You talk about it, and I grew up in similarly, and it seems so quaint now. Like I almost have a nostalgia for it. Like it's almost like those were the good old days. But at the time, it was certainly very annoying, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so, was he? Did you feel like he was a happy child, or was it kind of hard to tell at that point? You're in elementary school.
Yeah. No, he was happy. We both we had a lot in common. Our parents were the same ages. They had a lot in common, and we were both only children. We were both about the same build, same sort of temperament. What else? We have the same IQ. I don't remember what it is, but it's some high IQ. And they said we have the same. It's exactly the same. We started getting, you get all these offers then like, oh, take extra classes on the weekends. No, not going to happen. So, but yeah, so we had that. But so we made as much fun as we could in class. He was well behaved. We were usually at the top of the class as far as grades. So, he was really smart, and it's just a lot of the strict teachers we would just mess with, just like pretty much any kids in the 70s would be up to. When I was approached about the doing the documentary. I wasn't sure who was behind it at first because Lightbox, they work with a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't told at that time that Rolling Stone UK was involved. So I didn't know Rolling Stone had anything to do with it, or I would have told them to piss off. But yeah, so Lightbox contacted me. They sent me a letter about the project. No details really. And so, I sat on it. Expected them to call me or something because there was no date, no time, no nothing. Just this was happening. We may contact you. So when I talked to them, I didn't really give them much info because I didn't know what they were going to do with it. So I wasn't really forthcoming with more than they had asked, sort of. Okay.
What kind of questions did they ask you? And did you get the sense from what they were interested in that it was a negative perspective, or were they interested in just sort of what we're talking about, the full range of what you knew of him, as a kid?
They definitely let me say anything I wanted to. But I could tell just by some of the questions that, to me, they seemed a little leading. Like, I remember at one point I said something like, me and Brian have only ever dated the same girl once, even though we had such a small class. And she's like, oh, and she was asking me like, well, why is that? And I'm like, well, we just had different tastes. And she's like, well, what type of, she
Wow.
was trying to get me to class. I'm like, no, I'm not going there.
It seems like one of Manson's biggest artistic points of focus, you could say, is with the family and the negative state of the family. And these are threads that he really emphasizes in The Long, Hard Road Out of Hell, even, fictional stuff or whatever, right? But these are themes for him, is dysfunctional families. And so I'm curious if you ever saw any of that.
I would say his parents were always really supportive. No matter what crazy idea he had, there was never like a pushback or anything. It was kind of an enthusiasm with him. So I'm trying to think, like at one point, roller skating, we were really into roller skating. So we bought our own custom skates, and he had to have these blue wheels. And there were any idea that came up with, they would be behind.
Did you see tension like between the parents or anything like that? Or did it seem like actually it sounds almost kind of like, in some ways, like a really ideal childhood?
It was actually in a lot of ways, and that's why it kind of really irritated me when Evan Rachel Wood keeps trying to say that he had this childhood that was full of abuse and now he hates women because of it, and all these other accusations that are totally incorrect. But there was really no real tension in their family. It was who knows behind closed doors, but there was never any indication that there was like any major fights. And so I would say the tension that came about would be with adult authority figures. Go figure. So I think that's where a lot of the rebelliousness showed up. Our Bible teacher, for one, we had her multiple years. She was this very prissy lady who would barely open her mouth. And we thought she looked like a cat. And she's the one that's in the book, actually. Brian put the dildo in her drawer and all that stuff. That's her. And so she really irritated Brian once when she wanted us all to write a poem in class, that, I don't know, something about the Bible or something. And he wrote the lyrics down for Red Barchetta from Rush. She's never going to know that. So anyway, she read it but in front of the class, and we're sitting there laughing about it. And but she ended up like really dissing him on something like, this is totally off topic, and this is just being really singling him out for not like ridicule, but like, how come you can't do this assignment, that kind of thing. And I remember that one sort of stuck with him for a bit. And but it's hard to tell, because back in the 70s, we got paddled a lot. So there's it's hard to remember any of the specific issues because they all bleed together,
It's hard for people to understand now in later generations, particularly talking about millennials and Generation Z, to understand the beauty of adolescent rebelliousness and what there was to rebel against, because now in school, you have to, generally speaking, like the teachers are terrified of the students, right?
Right.
And
they've got video cameras all on them. Yeah.
And parents who are going to freak out. Did you touch my child and whatever? And I'm not saying we should be spanking kids at school, but I'm saying people don't understand that the climate that you and I grew up in, 70s, 80s, 90s, that the climate was very different, and that adolescence, one of the things that you were supposed to do as you became an adolescent and as you and beyond, was hate your parents for a while and rebel. And there was something to rebel against, whether it was your parents or authority figures, right?
Exactly.
Figures just aren't as nearly as entrenched, or are not as conservative, behaviorally conservative as they used to be. So I don't think that kids feel like, now it's about helicopter parents, right? And kids want to, when I taught college, I had students who couldn't wait to get out of class and call up their parents and chat with them. I'm just like,
what? Yeah, that's just not right.
So for people to look at, I guess what I'm saying, to look at Manson and the idea of a rebellious adolescent
Mhm.
who then becomes a rebellious rock star and is challenging authority and the church and conservatism and all of that. Like, people have to understand the climate out of which all of that grew.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, people actually thought that they could be possessed by devils by listening to albums and whatnot. They thought they'd have to get an exorcism, and so they'd play all that stuff up, and people were actually really afraid of that stuff. And so it was actually fun to rebel back then. It's like you said, there's something to rebel against. So it was a constant project of how to irritate this teacher or something.
At the same time, nothing was really that permanent because you didn't have surveillance everywhere. And so you could do things that were on the edge, or you could be a rebellious adolescent or 20-something or whatever, and you didn't have to worry that it was going to, in some crazy way, come back to haunt you because someone was getting it on camera or surveillance.
Mm-hmm. Basically, all the albums and books and things you can think of from the mid-'70s on, I remember either listening to with Brian or talking to about him, because most of the day we'd sit there and talk about albums, he'd draw stuff, so there's literally almost no classic rock you can think of that I can't remember listening to back then. And Brian was the person I listened to that stuff with. So he's very much tied up in my socio-cultural environment that we grew up in.
I guess what we're wanting to know is, like, you got to see him becoming an adult, friends with him through the changes, the transitions, becoming this big rock star. And I think that unfortunately, the impression a lot of people have, particularly from Evan Rachel Wood, and maybe also to a degree from the stuff that he said in his book, where he went overboard at times or fiction.
Right. But you got to remember, though, in the 90s when that book came out, every brands were being made by how extreme people were. So everything was focused on extremity, as extreme as possible. So I can see where Neil Strauss sort of, it's more of a marketing type vehicle for a rock star when they,
Well, because frankly, most of us, from a background like he had in Canton, Ohio, or in my case, East Texas, most of us who wrote just what really happened in our adolescence and high school and stuff, it's going to be pretty boring. So, you can't have a Marilyn Manson autobiography called The Long Hard Road Out of Hell and then just talk about kind of a normal upbringing.
Yeah.
But there was that perverted grandpa in the basement, though, right? Isn't that part accurate?
Yeah, that was. And to tell you how Manson is normally, it seems like he goes out of a way when he meets people that he hasn't seen in a while. He'll remember some small thing that either you did or something, and he'll bring it up, sort of like to your benefit in the conversation. Like a lot of times he'll tell people when I meet, he's like, "Oh, hey, I wrote my first song with him," and blah blah blah, stuff like that. It's like you don't have to do that, but he goes out of his way to do that for whatever reason. So it's like he values friendship immensely, because being only children growing up in our imagination for the most part, they when you do make a friend, if you click, then it's something you hold on to, especially in a environment like a Christian school that neither of us were believers. So it was it's hard to put it into words because I feel like I lucked out. It's like, I got to experience the 70s and 80s, some of the greatest music and all that stuff with my best friend who turns into Marilyn Manson, and he takes, like, I'll call it the project, and evolves it to its apex with Antichrist Superstar. So it's sort of like he kept going with what he was determined to express through his music until he got it to the point that he wanted it. I think we both saw Christianity as one of the biggest de-evolutionary forces that we have, and it's sort of developed to well, I don't want to get into all of that. So, but yeah, we had this rebellious streak against, well, one, authorities at that time, but Christianity especially, because of, we would see the hypocrisy of it. Just being in that environment every day for more than a decade, you get to see all aspects of people's so-called faith and things like that, based on how they behave, and, over years. And so there was just a lot to dislike with that. Yeah, so I'm trying to be careful because I don't want to put any words in his mouth. I do take issue with the accusations that have been made, because what they said was done, or what occurred, is so antithetical to the way Manson is in private that it's almost absurd. And it took me a while to get over just the fear, the anger at that, at being so misrepresented, that it took me a while to even be able to talk about it, because I would just go right to angry, and angry start to shut off rational thought and all that. So, because the environment we were brought up in, along with the temperament that he was born with, and the amount of rules we had to follow and all that, it builds character in a way that he's still very polite. People always notice that he's more soft-spoken than people think. He's, I would say, empathetic. Like I was saying before, he'll go out of his way to point something positive out about somebody else in a conversation, just to sort of make them feel better, or enhance the conversation, or I don't know exactly his motivation, but so it's like his entire character doesn't match with anything that they're saying. And two, repressed memories is complete hogwash. And I can't believe that a judge in California is actually going to let a case involving that go through, because most courts, I think in the 90s, started barring any sort of repressed memory cases from their courts. Well, one of the other things is some of the acts alleged would be Manson would be completely uninterested in that. Like this whole idea of him having sex with her semi-conscious body and all that. I mean, no sort of power play like that, some sort of sexual power games, or none of that is his style at all. I think most of the women that, at least that I know about, that have talked about their relationships with him, a word you hear a lot is sweetheart or sweet, or like he's a little more deferential to his dates, I guess. Not in a bad way, but just he's very receptive to their needs, and their goals, things like that. Because a perfect example was back when him and Evans first started going out. And I think, I don't want to put words in her mouth either, but she was concerned about her career at the time from going out with him. During that, she's even said how he encouraged her to do, different things she was interested in, but like he really got behind her and encouraged her success. I don't know how else to put it other than, and that's the only way I've ever seen him with girls, going all the way back to elementary school to today.
One question people would have is, when we read The Long Hard Road Out of Hell, and there are passages that talk about him calling women and like screaming, cussing them out, or threatening them, or this. It seems like a really defined mean streak toward his mother and toward other women as he gets older. So do you not see any of that, or is it just that is being improperly depicted or contextualized? That maybe like a teenager, sometimes his mom would come into the room and be like, "Mom, get out of here! We're doing something or whatever." But did you see any of this monstrous behavior?
Not at all. I mean, the bottle thing that they keep talking about. I think it was in the book where it says that he threw a bottle into his mom in the face. I think it says. Well, if I remember correctly, that incident was one where the way his parents' house was set up is from the kitchen counter. You could see all the way across the hall and all the way past the bathroom into his bedroom, and then you could see his bed way back there. So when his mom would turn around, we'd throw stuff through there and try and get it past her. I mean, what were we like? You're right. So anyway, he had these cars that were made out of glass. They were cologne bottles, I think. And so they weren't very heavy, but he decided he was going to throw one into his, try and hit the pillow in his bedroom. But right as he threw it, his mom turned around real quick. She forgot her keys, or I don't remember what it was, and it nicked her, right? And then it hit the wall. And so it wasn't like he, took a wind up and said, "I'm going to hit my mother in the face with this,"
Wait a minute. Okay, so just to get this straight, because this is the story in The Long Hard Road Out of Hell, the book, right?
Yes.
The story that's provided, and people attribute this to Manson. They say, "Look, it's his autobiography. It's ghost written," but people say that. But the story describes him getting outraged, chased after her with a bottle of cologne, a glass bottle, and threw it at her, and it hit her and scarred her up, and she started crying. Whereas what you're saying is completely different and much more innocuous, that you were just some bored kids that would throw things across the room, not even trying to hit her. And one day
behind her back. Behind her back. Yeah.
Throw things behind her back for a laugh, and one day she turned around unexpectedly and she got cut that way. So
yes,
completely false then what's in the book, basically.
The context is totally different. I mean, I can see in the book they were trying to focus on Brian was getting upset that he thought his mom was having an affair. I think that's what it was.
Okay.
And then from there, I think in the book it goes right to him throwing the bottle at her. But that's not the way things happen. Because we used to sit at that table all the time and throw stuff when she'd go by and, and laugh. But I remember that time when she turned around real quick and it just totally nicked her cheek and exploded everywhere. And she may have been crying. I don't know. I don't remember that part. I was looking at the explosion. But so where our concern was. But
did you see, though, anything truly like aggressive or violent or concerning, such as these accusers have accused him of?
No, I've never seen that. Because one thing I always hesitate to say, but I'm going to go ahead, is me and Brian had many things in common. I don't usually bring that up because I feel like I'm trying to equate myself with his achievements, which I'm not. But everybody used to consider us as one thing. Brian and Scott, or Scott and Brian, depending on who you're talking to, for years and years. So we were sort of a dynamic duo. And so that's why another part of this really bothers me, because they're attributing his behavior to his childhood, his development, all these other things. Well, we had the exact same environment. I mean, we were literally like two stalks of corn in the same row next to each other. And so I know that's not true, and I've never seen that type of behavior from him. I mean, some people will point to, rock stars backstage and their, either their irritation with the equipment or whatever. Everybody gets mad back there. And there's always people vying for your attention. So you'll see like this cloud of people follow them around. So So I never saw any behavior like that. But, given I wasn't in that environment at that particular time, I wasn't in LA. So some of those girls I saw, or women, I saw either on tour at a show, or I'd see Evan on the side of the stage sometimes.
Tell me, Scott, though, when you saw Evan, did you see a black aura around her?
No. She was jumping up and down, all into it. No black aura. Right. Yeah. That's the other part. I mean, if you look at everything they've said over the years since this particular time they say this happened, there's absolutely no indication of this. None of them really changed behavior or their interest or anything. And the fact that a movie star, an actress, can have all this, suffer all this abuse, but no one notices that's around her. It's just kind of absurd, when every little eyebrow for some of the photo shoots is, paid attention to. So it's like no one picked up on any of this that supposedly happened.
Do you feel like Manson's, Brian's, we might say gentleness or politeness or passivity, or however we might term that, do you think that makes them then more vulnerable in a paradoxical way to these kinds of personalities and so these kinds of accusations and these kinds of problematic personalities coming after him? Yes,
I would say that. Because like I was saying, generous is a good word, or gentle, I think you said. That's a good word. I would say every time I've seen him around dates, girlfriends, things like that, I think gentle would be a good word. It's not like he jerks them around or any of that kind of stuff. He's always very polite, very gentlemanly. Yes, I do, because he shows deference to, I think, the women he's interested in. That would be easily taken advantage of. And I can't say for sure or not, if that's happened, but that I can see where it might, because I think he I think he sees the good in people before he sees the bad, which might be hard for people to believe, but I think he has a genuine interest in other people. As sources of knowledge, sources of inspiration, friendship, all the human emotions. So if you enter a relationship with that mindset and a bad faith actress comes in, you would totally be susceptible to manipulation in that way. If there's someone showing deference to you a lot, they can manipulate you that way. But so yeah, I would say it does open him up to a lot of this stuff, because one, there's unofficially a sexual harassment industry that's, there's a whole setup of law firms and advocacy centers and whatnot. There's like a whole pipeline that these go through. And a lot of accusers have discovered that they can go all the way through the process to the end, to the court, and then they can settle. They can get money because there's insurance artists have to take care of things like false accusations, that kind of stuff. So it's almost like there's almost a blueprint for how to do this now.
Right.
And then you add, there's a factor to add here, is pretty much every decade, whether it be the Columbine school shooting or it be, was it Senator Lieberman, who called Marilyn Manson the sickest band in the world, I think it was, something over the top. And there's the father who and a little group of them who say Manson caused their son to kill himself. There's always these big things, and he's the perfect scapegoat to go to.
Again, it's helpful to understand this person as actually like the antithesis of what he's presented as. You know, we were talking about how he takes a genuine interest in people, which again is antithetical to the general view of him that's been put out there. Like he's this egomaniacal, raging narcissist. Nobody can stand to be around him, or people waking fear in his presence. You know, like Ashley Walters, Misrepressed Memories, his former assistant, who I like to remind people was fired twice, and she stole his car and wrecked his car and got a DUI, et cetera, et cetera. She admits all of this in her lawsuit.
I know.
But she paints this picture, and so does Evan Rachel Wood and Esme Bianco, of a situation at Manson's house where everyone is walking on eggshells and they're quaking in fear, and they have to put on these fake personas when famous visitors act like everything's okay, even though they're like, I don't know, like abused, trapped housewives or whatever. I mean, it doesn't seem like you're describing someone who's anything like that.
No, I don't. And that's why you haven't heard anyone describe him that way over the years. I mean, think of all the people who have interviewed him, the journalists, the backstage, I don't want to say roadies, but that's what you call it. Other people in the music industry, you know, if you talk to any of them, I can guarantee the vast majority will describe the same sort of thing. How they're usually taken about how polite he is, number one. And two, depending on the era, you know, he used to like to keep it dark, things like that. But I can't think of anyone who would describe him otherwise, or who has, until, I mean, there's always, with any rock star, there's always a few stalker types that are out there who will try to make all kinds of wild claims. So there's always those people. I think, man, a couple of the accusers I would put in that category. Well, I got a couple of things that picture. I can give you a couple of pictures. I don't know how I can get them across here. Let's see. Here's our school, number one.
You go, yeah.
I can always scan them and send it to you, but
that's cool too. But it's cool to see you holding it.
Yeah, that's the school. A lot of people, when they first see it from the sides, say it looks like Shawshank.
It does kind of.
Yeah. You can see it like in pictures like this. It's Brian just standing there, but you can see how there's like spikes around the school there.
Yeah.
This made for a lot of fun at recess. Let's see. Here's one of bowling somewhere. That's me behind him.
Yeah.
The Channel 4 wanted some of my picture, and I said no.
Well, I'm smart.
Yeah, here's a good one. Birthday party. You can spot him.
I see him. Yeah. Easy to spot.
Yep. His girlfriend there, and mine was. I'm doing this backwards. Here.
Yeah.
So, let me see if there's anything else. These are all known. I'll give you one that you know how in his shows I think he still does the Pope one with he's at the tall pulpit.
Yes.
Okay. I think I know where that came from. I haven't verified this with him, but this ultra religious church that my parents went to, he got dragged there a couple of times. And I think part of that's in the book, but I think that the pulpit was at this church.
So we're talking about the church with the crazy televangelist who turned out to be gay and was involved in sex scandals and stuff, actually. But
Ernest Angley.
Yes,
that was his name.
Ernest Angley, yes, and he had the crazy toupee, the crazy wig. I'll have to get a picture of it. Okay.
Robin Williams used to call him Ernest Angry. He was always, so he has a song or a skit about it. I forget.
So go ahead.
So that church that he got dragged to a few times, I think the inspiration for that tall pulpit that he still has in his show comes from the pulpit that was there. And let me show you this beauty. Doesn't it sort of remind you of that?
That is quite a lectern.
Yep.
Wow.
Yes.
But it does. No, you're right. I mean, he said that too, that it was an inspiration for becoming a future rock star because of the way was conducted these church services.
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to think. Oh, here's. Let's see what year this is. Oh, here's 8th grade. Awful pictures, but here's the 8th grade. Let's see. There we are.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure, I don't know what I'm doing in that picture, but you know, he's got his braces on there, I believe. But yeah. So that's our entire class right here, 8th grade. That's the whole class.
Oh, yeah.
I can't get it on. There you go.
Yeah.
You know, so we spent like almost a decade with a lot of those people, year after year after year, and definitely not full of abuse and the rest of Evan's characterizations. I'm trying to think. Here's another good picture. Let's give you an idea. There we go. Here's like when Brian draws, he always leans down into what he's doing. Here's a perfect picture of that. Let's see. That's him drawing. He likes to get nice and close. I think he still does his watercolors on the floor. But yeah. I was trying to get the picture of the environment that it was in. There's Brian in the front row with white pants on. Let me see.
Oh, yeah. Let me make it look.
Yeah. See him?
I do.
Yeah. Trying to get the glare off here. There. Let me see. But that's him.
White pants, right?
Yep, that's him with the white pants right there.
Yeah. You can see it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's our whole class once again. Yeah. The dresses the girls are wearing, they actually come up a little bit. They're above the ankles now. If you go back a few years, they're all the way to the ankles.
Oh, wow.
Yep. Let me see. Trying to think. He's in the back row in this one. Let's see. Like we're back.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see him.
Yeah.
No, this is really helpful too. This has been great content, and people are going to really appreciate it.
I hope so.
Because it gives real insight into who he really is, and
I
think, and that just debunking that book is a huge thing, honestly, because like that story, how many times I've heard a story about his mom, that he threw a bottle at her or a perfume bottle or whatever at her.
Right.
Oh, let me get myself back on the screen. Sorry. Okay. Anything else you thought of, or is
let me see. Well, not really, but the one thing that bothers me is the you had the E. Jean Carroll case and the defamation that Trump was found guilty of. It's like you take that amount of defamation, then you put all the things that the accusers have said about Manson, and then you've got all this stuff that Evan goes on a media tour, like 3 different talk shows, and it says all this stuff, but yet there's this question about whether it's defamation or not. You have all these anti-slap rules that protect this, and
Right.
just that whole concept bothers me. That it's almost like there's the bar is super high for men to get be awarded defamation, and for women it's down here.
Okay.
So,
well, listen, I really appreciate you sitting down with me, and
anytime.
and it's good to have people
Mm-hmm.
who know him going on the record. And I mean, it's just interesting. On top of that, it really does give some insight into him. But also, it's good to have people who know him going on the record, because it still does matter. And one day, it's going to matter for his legacy. Because even if he's able to come back and he's able, to do shows and put out music, which he's doing, his legacy is really tarnished right now. And so, hopefully, it'll be like an Oscar Wilde situation where more people will learn about the truth, and one day people will look back and say, "Oh, this was a great artist who was profoundly victimized by cultural biases of his day."